So creating a letter form directly in Illustrator using the drawing tools can be made much simpler by designing it on paper first of all and working out beforehand where the anchors need to be placed. So here I have an example of a Year 9 student's design which has all been sort of boxed up to show the structure, and also the sort of corner points have been identified of the letter A and the J and all these different elements. So that makes life in Illustrator sort of much easier. So this has been dropped in as a layer that has been locked, and I've now created a layer on which I will draw. What's quite important is that we use the pen tool. Where you have a letter that is very sort of straight, just from point to point to point to point, like with this A with no curves, things are sort of very straightforward. And what we need is a colour selected that doesn't appear in the scan. So for example, here on the toolbar on the right hand side there's colour swatches. These two blocks at the top here, one is for the fill and one is for the line stroke. So we want a line stroke that is a different colour, so in this case I'm picking pink, and please make sure there is no fill. That's because by default it will automatically fill a shape, a colour, even if the shape is not a closed shape, which it needs to be in Illustrator. So for example, if I had a colour fill and tried to create a triangle, if I went from point to point to point, it automatically fills that space so it looks like a shape, but it is actually not a shape until we've gone back to that point of origin. So that can be a bit confusing. So we're going to avoid that by making sure there is no fill. So we're going to click on the fill and then click none, which is the white square with the red line through it. Okay, so for this A with the pen tool, all I need to do is click from point to point and work my way around this A with the lines in order to create a shape. So I'm going to start from this point up to the next, 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 and so on. So now we've gone back to that point of origin. That shape is now closed. And that also means that now that shape can be filled, and we can change the colour very easily. Okay. So what we're interested now in is basically creating the center, the whole of this A. So again, we're just going to draw a shape. We're going to start from this point here. We're going to go up, down. You get these helpful little intersection lines which makes life a lot easier as well. So there we have a second shape. Okay, I'm just going to use the selection tool here. So we have two shapes. One shape is here and the other shape is there. So what I'm going to do, I'm now going to give my letter a fill, and then I'm going to identify that second shape, the inside. Just for ease, I'm going to change my fill to white. And then I'm going to make sure that that shape is on top of the other. So I'm just going to check that by going to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. Now that's important because we're now going to punch that first shape into the second shape to make a hole. So I'm going to select both of those shapes and I'm going to go to Window, Pathfinder. So you will get a little dialog box that comes up like this, and what we're after is this one here which says minus front. So to create a compound shape and subtract from shape area. So if we click on that, it will look for that shape that's in front and will punch a hole into it. So I've now created that hole. You can see the drawing through it. Okay, excellent. The Pathfinder tool can be really useful for joining shapes together. So maybe I work on this part down here and create this part with the pen tool, the curves, and then I will join that to that existing A. Okay, let me try that. So again, we're going to use the pen tool. I'm going to make sure there is no fill set, and now we're going to click on that first anchor point. We're going to go downwards. As you can see, it's sort of highlighted green, which means it's sort of in line with that existing line. There's one anchor point. Now this time down here I'm going to set a second anchor point and click and hold the mouse down and pull out to achieve a curve. What's quite helpful is if you press shift, it will lock it horizontally, which can be quite useful. So I'm just going to try and create my curve there. I'm quite happy with that. I'm then going to click on that last anchor point that I've just drawn, and then do the same, go to the next one, click and then hold the mouse down and again pull out to create that curve. So what I'm looking for is a lovely flow from the first curve into the second. I think I'm quite happy with that, so I'm going to let go of the mouse. I then want to go again from that last anchor point across to my next one, let's say about here, and then down to this point here, and I'm going to get again click and hold the mouse down and pull out to get that inside curve. It's quite helpful, as I said, if you hold down shift and keep that handle nice and horizontal. Great. And again, that last point that I worked from that anchor point up to this point, again holding the mouse down, pulling out to try and achieve that curve and making sure that it flows from one nicely into the other, and then again from that anchor point up to here and then back to that home position so it ends up a closed shape. Okay, done. So I can now give that a fill, and that is my main letter form, I think, done. The last thing I'm going to do is combine those two shapes together. So I'm going to hold shift, use my selection tool, click and drag those two elements, and then I'm going to click on the Pathfinder tool, unite. Let's just test that out. I can just click and try and move it, and my full letter form moves. If things aren't quite in line, we can use the direct selection tool, click on anchors. It might be two different anchors that you select with shift, and we can shift those across slightly to make sure everything is in line. Okay, I'm just going to hide that original drawing so we can see the final letter form. So there's a little bit of a bump there to iron out, but that is pretty good.